Hi, we are going into our first portrait and it looks like we're just going to do a local color background, and I'm putting the reference up there so I can kind of match what my local color background is going to be. Now I'm checking how light and dark it is by looking at the value scale from white to black and kind of getting an idea of what kind of mixture of gray I want to do. I added a second black here, and I think this is where my first mistake happens. I noticed that in the image of looking at my value scale, it appeared to be like just slightly blue. So I thought maybe I should use a carbon black instead of the Mars black. I originally was going to do Mars black to limit the amount of blue in my grayscale. But then I realized that there is a little bit of blue in it anyhow. And the reason why I wanted to limit blue is because when I'm looking at my local color, it has more of a warmer feel to it. So I was thinking if I'm using the Cad Red Light, which is already a warm red, then I wouldn't want to make it more cool, you know? So I went back and forth. I ended up doing a little bit of Mars black and a little bit of carbon black. And in my personal opinion, I think this is where I first started to run into problems, because by adding more black, and then, okay, we add matte medium, but by adding more black, I'm really darkening my my background. And I know it doesn't appear to be very dark right now, but that doesn't appear to be dark because I added that transparent matte medium. So it's kind of like, you know, making the color that I just made a little bit more transparent. But what I should have done, if I could go back in time, is actually try to match the local color for the lightest value, because I know for a fact that I'm going to be going darker anyhow. So it would be easier for me to go darker than to try to pull out as many lights as I can to kind of see what I'm doing. Another thing that I probably would have done differently with this painting is, since the background was darker than I anticipated, I probably should have used a white transfer paper instead of a regular graphite transfer paper here. When you'll see when I'm done making this transfer that it's very dark. It's hard to see the information that I put down by doing the transfer because graphite is pretty dark. If I would have gone with a white transfer paper, it would have been much easier for me to see what I am doing, which could be another reason that I ran into problems, but there's a lot, so I'll walk you through all of it. And this part is pretty straightforward. It's just laying out the transfer as I normally do, so I will let you just sit back and watch this. Okay, so we're coming up to the teeth right now, And I'm outlining lips at the moment, and this is probably going to be an area that you're interested in knowing about. I'm not adding in for the upper lip line before we get to the teeth. I'm not adding in everything for his mustache because it's such a broad value. It's like a darker value that we can just paint across that and get the values in, and then later if we wanted to add like a few whiskers or whatever, we can add that at the very end. As far as teeth go, I think it's a little bit tricky because you don't want the teeth to look like they're outlined in black. And even though I'm outlining the teeth at the moment, it's mainly for information. You can see that I outlined the top teeth because they are distinct. Now at the bottom, I'm still adding the lines in between, but that is only to give me information about how to shade it, not to add a line in and say I'm done with the teeth. Otherwise it looks like the person has like food stuck in their teeth or something. So by adding the lines in for this transfer, don't think that means that that's how we're going to paint it in. This is strictly giving us information later to figure out how we would shape it, how we'd create the structure of each individual tooth, and without having to add lines in between to say that those are teeth. As you notice too, for the beard, I haven't laid in any information for the same reason that I mentioned with the upper lip mustache, and that is because we just mainly want to get in what the shades and the shadows are. And as you can see here, I added the detail underneath of like how far the hair goes down, but that is about it. Now, can you see what I'm talking about at the moment? I'm just going to spray it. You can see the transfer better, but it is still hard to see all the information. So if you're doing something similar with your own painting, I would highly recommend getting white transfer paper, and that will help you with your drawing process and your painting process. Hi, welcome back, and we are blocking in our values with our matte medium. Here is a second mistake. Matte medium tends to, like, it is transparent, but at the same time, something crazy going on there. Even though it is a transparent medium, because it is matte, for some reason I noticed that it does kind of, it's not as fluid as I would want it to be. It kind of drags a little bit, and it also dries a little bit more quickly. So instead of adding your matte medium directly to your mixed value scale, maybe just keep your matte medium off to the side and add your paint to it after you've mixed it. It'll make it a little bit easier for you. Okay, so at the moment I am laying in my darkest values, and it appears that I'm using just a small filbert brush, which is rounded on the, it's kind of like a flat brush, but it's rounded on the top. It keeps everything pretty smooth, and so I'm just going through. I'm not doing any big details. And I'm still using my darkest value, but as you can see, I added in a lot more of my medium, and that is what makes it more transparent. And because we have our local color in the background, we don't have to add very much of the dark paint to our medium, because it's going to darken it even just with a tiny amount of paint added. And that is what I'm doing right now too. You can almost do the entire painting by just adding tiny bits of black to your glaze, and then if you want to build up the opacity to make it more opaque, then you can just let it dry and add an additional layer. So now what I'm doing is I'm taking more of the middle color, which is more of a neutral color of the value scale that we created, and going around and just finding any place that's slightly darker than the local color and adding those shadows in, same as we did with the other ones. Now you notice that I'm not even touching the area where his beard is. I'm actually painting the darkest values underneath the beard, and that's because I just really don't want to lose that information at the moment. I know that later on I can add that in, but if you're ever worried about like trying to figure out where things are, just choose one to focus on and make it look really nice. And then later you can come back when you know where that thing is that you have to build, and come back to it after everything is dried and you feel ready to work on it. I'm now starting to go similar to the local color, just slightly lighter in value, and this is just going to start to pull things forward. So lighter colors will appear to come forward and darker colors appear to be pushed back. So all we're doing is kind of working back and forth in certain areas, and we're not going to our lightest value. That is something that you can honestly wait until the very end to do that, because you don't really need very much of your lightest value at this point. At the moment, we just kind of want to start shaping things a little bit, so it makes it easier later to know where our lightest value is. Okay, so as I said that, it looks like I put a very light value, and I think this may actually be part of the problem of having such a dark background. I guess we'll see. I don't know if you've noticed this, but it appears that some of my paint that I've mixed is dried on the glass palette already. And I do think that is because I added the matte medium to it. And this is kind of what I'm talking about. You can kind of get your paints to last longer if you don't add matte medium to it. It's not entirely the same with gloss medium, although I have learned my lesson lately to not do the same thing either by adding it in. But anyhow, because it's dried, I'm still trying to pull some of that paint up. And when you do that, you're actually going to get some dried pieces of paint into your paint mixture and start getting it onto your painting, and it dries on there. And because acrylic, it dries so quickly, then you kind of start getting this texture of dried paint because you're trying to pull up some of that mixture. So another big mistake that I made here is what I should have done is just start over, like clean the glass and remix my paint, and add my paint mixes to my glaze instead of trying to make it work when it's not working. And because my mixes have dried, it's really hard. I can tell it's really hard for me to continue to match what I want to do. Like, I can tell that I am struggling at the moment because I'm being a little bit too lazy by not remixing my paint. I'm like, you know what? I just want to get this thing down, and you have to be careful with what kind of mindset you're in. And I've probably said this before, but if you're feeling tired, or if you're feeling a little bit frustrated that something's not going the way it is, then maybe you should just step away and come back to it in an hour or even 15 minutes. Just step away for a little bit. Okay, so that's the end of that video, and we'll go to sequence. We'll go to the next video right now. Okay, we are blocking in our values with a gloss glazing liquid, and this is part one. I sort of feel like at this moment in time, from the future of me looking back on this, I would just use gloss glazing liquid for all of my portraits and kind of skip the matte medium. Now that I've had a lot of portraits under my belt, the gloss glazing medium pretty much accomplishes everything that I want to do. All right, this is what I'm talking about. By having your gloss glazing liquid off to the side and your paints mixed, you can add your paint to the gloss without worrying if the gloss is affecting your mixed paint. So I have a feeling that this is probably going to go a lot better than the last painting session that you just watched. Hopefully. And my paints look mixed a little bit better. you can kind of tell already the gloss glazing liquid is just so much smoother. It goes on smoother. It's easier to blend. I highly recommend it for skin tones, and honestly I don't know if there is another medium out there for acrylic that does this, which is like very similar to oil, and that is like allowing the blending process and the glazing process to build up your layers. And to be completely honest, it kind of looks like I'm fixing some of my mistakes that I made in the last video. And I think those mistakes could have been avoided if I just cleaned my palette and started over and just stuck with the gloss glazing liquid like I'm doing right now. So I'm not sure if these were on 2 separate nights or not, but I can tell that I'm doing a lot of correcting from what I did in the painting session before. Now, at the moment, I know that he has like kind of a mustache, or like, what do we call it, like a 5 o'clock shadow right here. So I want to kind of focus on how I lay that in, and it appears at the moment that I'm just not even focusing on it at all, but just focusing on the skin around it. Here's a really good example. Like, it's dark, but it's not as dark as I remember his, is it 5 o'clock shadow? As the mustache area like was in the photo. And I think that's really important because you're kind of focusing on, like, a person is not like only beard, they have skin underneath it. And so it's good to just add that skin in first, and then later on when you add the beard on, it does appear, because you're using transparent glazes, it does appear that you can see like the skin values underneath, like the shape of the mouth, the shape of the chin. And that's gonna help you avoid like kind of awkward facial hair. It's just making sure you're focusing on the skin underneath first, and then later on you can focus on the hair. And by not touching the beard at all, that texture that we've gotten from, I don't know, the last glaze probably is actually starting to even have that beard-ish texture already without having to do anything. So that's kind of like a really, really happy accident. And the cheek area can be kind of tricky because we want to, like, I know a lot of times you just want to focus on like the highest part of the cheek, but because it does like shape in one direction and then wrap around in a different direction, and then there's a part on the top, and like, it's really important to not think of it as a shape that you imagine it in your mind, but to kind of like think of it as a structure that has like it's almost like a triangular shape. This is weird. But yeah, so pay attention to the information that has been given to you on your photograph, and see, like, is it a warmer value? And by warmer, I mean, like, does it appear more yellowy or orangey or red? Or does it appear more blue, purple, or green, which would be a colder value? So if that's the case, you would probably want to introduce, you know, a different type of red, which I will talk about in the next video. At the moment, we're only laying in our warm reds using our cad red light, but that is something else that we can play with in the future, and you'll see that with the next video, so ignore that. Don't get bogged down with that information right now. Let's just focus on what's going on. I haven't touched the teeth yet. I'm kind of just working around it because I know I'm probably gonna have to focus my attention on that, so it's kind of like I'm working around up to that point. But the good thing is because we have that background layer, it's already sort of natural. You're kind of getting that fleshy tone of the gums already there. So like anything else, we're just gonna be we're gonna be filling in our values, which is our light and dark paint. And at the moment, it appears that I am kind of softening some of those highlights that I had in by using in between values, my middle values. And all I mean by that is if you have your high value, which is like pure white, and your darkest value, which is like pure black, when you put those next to each other, it's really harsh. You want kind of the gradient in between your middle values to create a shape to make it look like it's curving, because we want to keep, like, every part of the face does have like curve to it because of the way the skin folds around your skull. Anyhow, we'll save that thought and move on to the next video. Okay, we are back with part 2, and what I was talking about in the last video was how when the skin stretches around your skull, it sounds like super metal, but when it stretches around your skull, like, it's still going to be rounded. We don't have like actual angles, you know, like a hard angle like you would see in a book. Everything is rounded. So creating a round shape means that we have to have those gradients in between to appear like we're getting from one place to the other. And how we do that, again, just as a reminder, are the lightest values appear to be moving forward, your darkest values appear to be moving backwards. So we create the values in between to get from one to the other. Okay, we are onto the teeth, and that's kind of what I'm talking about. You can tell with the gums. So I have the lightest values coming like forward. It's making it look like there's a curve to it. And I'm going to do a similar thing with the teeth. But because he's at like a 3/4 angle, which means like part of his face is in light and the other part is like more in shadow. So we have to kind of shape the teeth that way, where the part that is in the light is lighter and the part that is in the shadow is a little bit darker. And very important, just make sure you are really doing thin transparent glazes. You can always build more on top, but it is really hard to kind of reshape it, because if you lose that, then you're kind of having to redo everything. So make sure you keep everything transparent so you don't lose the work that you've done underneath. Kind of like what I'm doing right now. Another thing too to keep in mind is white is opaque. So if you add white to your paint, even though you add a transparent glaze, it's going to make your paint opaque, so use it sparingly. At the moment, I'm using a detail brush, and I really like to blend with detail brushes by adding more glaze. So you can kind of soften it out by adding more glaze until it's like blended into the background. I think it's important to note at this moment, well, here's a blending brush. So what I do is I add the color in and use a dry blending brush to soften the edges out and blend it into the work that I have underneath. You see that, like, right by his nose, there's a little bit of like a paint mark there, and I guarantee you that came from that one painting session I did where the paint dried on the glass palette, and I probably mixed it into my paintbrush, added it on, and it dried there. So now it appears that he has a mark there where he does not. There's really no way to hide that either. You just kind of paint around it and hope that it'll blend in. You could tell how the glaze is, like, I barely add paint to the glaze. I just want a little touch of it. And as you progress in your layers, you kind of want to use more glaze than paint, so you don't lose the work that you've done before. And I know that in the next video, or maybe, I'm not sure which video, it might even be this one, but like at the moment, I'm so happy with the way that this portrait is going. Like, I was on the right path at the moment. And then I made a big mistake at the end of this video. So if this were a dream world and I could go back in time and be here, what I would do at this very moment in time is just, I'm going to say it and then you can see, I would let everything dry and skip that leveling gel that I used in the past 3 portraits. You'll see what I mean. It's like heartbreaking to watch this because I really love the way it's going right now. I guess another thing to keep in mind too, like you can tell on the board the paint is already drying. I'm trying to like peel the paint up and get underneath it to get the wet mixed paint. And lesson from the other video, just stop. Like if you're getting to that point where your paint has dried, stop. And I know that I continued because I was so close to the end, and I wanted to have this like filmed for you guys. So I just kept on like remixing, and I mean, for this very specific part of the process though, it worked out. But I'm not sure how long I sat for this painting session. I knew that I wanted to, I knew because for the purpose of this class that I wanted to get to a certain point so that the next day when I filmed, I would have you guys at a certain spot that would make it easier for learning, but it also made me do things like this where I allowed the paint to dry on the board and not remix it. So think about your own deadlines in your life. If you're doing this for fun, big word of advice is when your paint dries, stop for the night or stop for your painting session, or just clear it and spend some time remixing your paint. It's not going to be exactly the same that you had before, but that's never been a big deal. At least you know that you're only like mixing up your 3 hues. You have your like white, your black, and your cad red. So it's not like you can really stray too far from what you had. All right, so check this out. I'm adding in the hoodie part. Pretty thick too. Cleared off my canvas, and that has not even dried. And I'm adding my leveling gel on. And what is happening at the moment is that wet paint, or it's not even like completely wet, slightly dry, slightly wet, is going into the leveling gel and adding this goopy glaze that is like taking that paint and getting it all over his face. Like, okay, so let's see how this dries. I'll see you in the next video. Okay, look what we have here. Color glazing part 1. So that leveling gel not only, like, you could see the clumpiness of everything, but it also dulled down the face. It pulled up the paint from the hoodie that I laid in. It's just like, it's hard to look at, and I never finished the ear. What I should have done is skip the hoodie altogether, finish the ear, and then let it dry overnight and not add that leveling gel at all. And to be completely honest, I'm not a huge fan of that leveling gel, and it worked nicely for, you know, like what I did in the last 3 paintings, but I never was like in love with it. I understand why acrylic painters use it. It does give you like a thicker, clear in between. So what ends up happening is it appears as though like there's a separate layer that gives you more, it appears like kind of skin-like because you can see through the layers, but you can do that same effect by just adding transparent glazes with your gloss glazing liquid, the bottle, the tube that we have. So I can tell you at this moment in time, from here on out, or after this painting, I still go crazy with the leveling gel. But after this painting, my next paintings for the rest of my life, I am not going to be using this leveling gel. So on your materials list, when you see it added on there and I have an asterisk that says optional, that's the reason why. I understand why a lot of artists do use it, but personally I am not using it, and you can see at the moment why I'm not using it. Yeah, I wish I could go back in time. I'm trying to now correct all of my mistakes, and I can't even do a proper glazing, a proper color glazing. Well, the teeth look pretty good. The teeth look pretty good. But because I have that huge separation and everything is all messed up from that leveling gel, by adding my yellow hues, my blue hues to the skin, it looks like he's wearing a mask. Where if I never did that, those yellow hues and the blues and everything would just properly glaze in, blend in flawlessly, because the work that we did before with, started off with a local color background. And then after that, we added our dimension, we built our like sculpture by doing our local color values. So you still had your red, CAD red values in there. And then pretty much you should almost be done with the whole process by just adding in a little bit of glaze here and there, color glazes, to kind of match what the lighting is like and whatever. Instead, I'm sort of, at this moment in time, it appears that I'm kind of like repainting the whole thing. I mean, just remember what it looked like in the last painting. It was like, ugh. I noticed too that that leveling gel, like it does take so, like I kind of wonder how long it actually takes to dry, because it is so thick. I notice that even if you let it dry overnight, and I say dry overnight, it's still like slightly tacky, which causes resistance when you're pulling the paint across it. My best friend with acrylic painting at this moment in time is that gloss glazing liquid by Open. I'm not sure how much it costs. I think it's maybe around $15 to $20, but I'm telling you, you have to get it. It's a game changer. And just I would skip the matte medium. I'll put that on optional. You don't need it. You could just do the gloss glazing for the entire thing. And for sure, I'm personally skipping the leveling gel, even though it will be added on the list, but it will be in optional. So hopefully you haven't purchased it, and if you have purchased it, maybe you can play with it and see, because I know you can also add it, sort of like how you do with your gloss glazing. You can add it directly to your paint, but it is very thick. So if you're someone who loves to see the brush strokes, like you can see the brush strokes from me just adding a thin layer. If that's you, then this might be a perfect medium for you to add to your toolkit. But for someone who, like me, who doesn't even like texture on the tooth of my paper, I like everything very smooth so I can like have my paintbrush glide across and do exactly what I wanted to do. So for someone like me, this is like a little bit of a nightmare. But really it is all about, I mean, everyone has their own style, their own technique. So, yeah. Okay, so I kind of got away from the painting a little bit, but the lips and the teeth, I think, are actually pretty well done at the moment. Oh, great, here I go. Let me just wait before I say anything else. Okay. The teeth especially, like, you don't need very much information, and you don't need it to look like your teeth are, like, I don't know, castle turrets, where they're, like, super round. They're not, you know, they're like flat on the top and then rounded around the outside, and they have little grooves in it, and they're imperfect. At least mine are. But in between, because he has a slight gap in between his teeth, like it is dark in there. It looks like it did add a very dark value layer in there. But you can almost just make sure that it's like a dark valued red. Because inside of our mouth, it's like pinkish purple red. So we have to kind of think about those values. Like it's not pure black inside there. It's not like there's a black hole inside of our mouth, unless, you know, hold that thought. We're going to go on to the next one. But basically, pink values on the inside of your mouth instead of a black hole. All right, I will see you in the next video. Okay, this is part 2 of color glazing, and I know that it's part 2 because I'm struggling. And look at this, I added the gloss to my paint directly. And in my mind, I probably thought I have a lot of correcting to do at the moment. I want my paint to last for a long time. But just like by adding the matte medium to your paint, I've been having similar things happen by adding the gloss glaze liquid directly to my paint. Now, since I haven't mixed it though, it's not like that big of a deal because I could just clear it off and add the pure paint pigment on later in case it does dry on me or get clumpy. But again, I would just highly recommend not adding the gloss glaze to your paint mix, your paint or your mixtures like immediately. Just keep it off to the side, and if you need to add paint to it, do it right before you add it to your canvas. So yeah, I'm definitely struggling in this piece right now. I think my biggest problems that I'm probably feeling at the moment in time is the texture. That clear leveling gel that I added really messed with the texture of my painting. It created a separation from that layer that I loved that I painted. So now what I'm trying to do is just figure out the best way to correct. So if you can avoid correcting and just, you know, follow a process that works, that's like the ideal, right? So hopefully you take the tips that I'm giving you at the moment and can avoid a mistake like I'm doing. And here is a little bit of a note about the technique that I'm using at the moment. I add paint in, highlights, and then I soften it immediately after applying it down with a blending brush. So there's a blending brush, and by adding a little bit of paint in and softening it, you're not getting those harsh lines, but you're getting a little bit of faux texture added, like pores or wrinkles. You could do the same thing for. Now it appears I'm using I'm using a smaller filbert brush. Filbert is sort of like a flat but rounded on the top. And I'm just adding in some darker valued glazes, kind of like a reddish, it appears, like I think that is something that I lost when I did that leveling gel and the blue paint from the hoodie mixed in and just kind of created this blue, like, it almost appears, I don't know if you remember it, like appeared like a frosty layer over his face. And I know for a fact too that because that paint was not wet completely, but it was slightly dried and got into that leveling gel, it made the leveling gel so much more clumpy. I wanted to say clumpier, but I'm not sure if that's the right word. I'm finally working a little bit on the ear. So it's no secret here that I struggle with ears, and if I can avoid painting them, I will. You'll notice in my work that I'll try to usually like have hair come over the ears, and that is because that is something I struggle with, and it takes me a long time to work to like mentally wrap my head around the shape of the ear, and I would rather just move on to things that I really like want to work on. So because ears are so easily hidden, most of the time I cover it up, to be honest. Okay, so at the moment I'm adding some highlights to the eyebrows. Eyebrows can be a little tricky, and my trick for doing eyebrows is a little bit of a back and forth, where you can either do it where you like kind of lay in your darkest value first, and then later after it dries you can go in with the flesh tone color and do kind of a reverse eyebrow where you add in the skin. Or you can just kind of keep it like there's no eyebrows and then add each layer individually, each thing individually, but that kind of looks a little bit bad at times because it appears that they're just like individual hairs, and there is a shadow underneath that. It was a little bit darker on the eyebrow, so we'll talk about that more in the next video though. And whoa, I can't believe it, we're actually moving on to our 7th video, which is the last one in here, so hopefully we can get all this information in right away. Okay, I'll see you soon. Okay, we are back with color glazing details with a gloss glazing liquid, and to be perfectly honest with you, I'm not super thrilled with the way this is looking at the moment. The texture, the color, I just feel like there's a lot that has gone not to plan for this one. I would kind of be interested in redoing this with the thing with my lessons learned, basically. So if I do have time in the future to redo this, I will, but I haven't done it for this class. I might just even move on to a different subject. But we were talking about the eyebrows before, and I want to finish that thought because I think it's kind of important. Eyebrows, eyelashes, and facial hair are really difficult for people. And the most important thing you can do is just get the values of the skin underneath first. And it might look really weird, like, oh, this person doesn't have any eyebrows. That's fine, you don't need to really worry about that, but make sure you kind of know where the eyebrows are, you know. So what I would do is, instead of like maybe making it completely flesh tone, you could kind of make it darker as if there's a shadow underneath the eyebrows already. And I found, to be honest with you, by adding in like a transparent glaze where the eyebrow will be added in with a darker value, so it's darker but you can still see the skin tone well, that makes it easier to add on some individual eyebrow hairs in very specific parts, like here where they kind of come this way up and there, and right here they kind of come down, and then here they kind of come up and meet. So you kind of want to pay attention to which direction the eyebrows are going. Facial hair, I mentioned it earlier, just get the skin values underneath first, and then you can go from there. At the moment it appears that I'm trying to fix some of my mistakes by just adding a clear gloss glazing liquid. I'm trying as hard as I can to get it even, because I feel like that is where some of my problems were, and I do think it helped, actually. In oil painting, there's a technique called oiling out, which means you, let's say we're doing the same exact portrait, and with oil, you work on a certain part, and you use a specific like type of oil or medium to get a finer detail or whatever. And eventually what happens is you have parts of paint that have built up more than other areas, and or some areas that have dried slower than other areas as well. So what happens is when you come back to your painting session in a day or a few days, everything looks weird. Like some parts are glossy, some parts are matte, and nothing looks even. So you do something as a method called oiling out, where you kind of just apply a thin layer of oil to the entire thing. So when you begin painting again, then everything is kind of on the same level. So you could do something similar here by doing that with your gloss glazing liquid, but just make sure everything is dry. Give it a day, you know, at least a night, to dry out completely before you add on a clear gel to kind of even everything out. And some of those colors that you felt like were lost will pop back up and everything will look a little bit more even. You know what you're working with. All right, so I'm not actually, I think it's actually looking pretty good. I kind of like the way it's looking at the moment. It's soft. It appears a little bit like kind of like it's like a hot summer night or something where there's a lot of humidity in the air. And I'm not talking about the texture. I'm talking about like the actual technique of the painting. It's a little bit softer than the actual photograph of him. But considering the amount of work that I had to do to fix my mistakes, I'm actually feeling pretty good with the way it's looking. Now I'm going in with my individual liner brush to add in some of those hairs I was talking about before. Adding in a little bit of the eyelashes. So this is something weird though. So I wanted, by adding in any of the eyelashes, we're kind of getting rid of all the whites of his eyes, which I really don't want. Because we don't want it to appear like his eyes are all like dark, even though it is a nighttime scene. I guess we'll have to see how it finishes up. And the hoodie, jacket, or whatever that he's wearing, it appears I'm just keeping it super soft and letting the focus be on his face, which is another great little tip. Is detail pulls forward and blurriness pushes backwards, so you can play with the push and pull, similar to light comes forward, dark goes back, and same with warm colors come forward and cool colors go backwards. So those are tips that I'll continuously say over and over again in these lessons to remind you of that. And it looks like I'm wrapping up. Oh gosh. I hope this was dry. It's like that technique I was just talking to you about, like oiling out. I'm glazing out at the moment. I think I'm trying to level out everything one last time, but I don't think I waited long enough. There's still paint on. I didn't. Oh no. Ugh. Let's hope you would think you would think I would have learned my lesson. Oh no. Yep, I put that clear leveling gel on again. I didn't realize I did it again. Oh no, it's getting worse and worse. I realized that my mistake too late. It must have been super late and I wasn't like, I don't know. You kind of, okay, I actually think I realized why I added that leveling gel. I think because it was so uneven, I thought by doing another leveling gel, by doing another layer of leveling gel, it would kind of smooth everything out. And then as I started to do it, I realized that I just made the same mistake that I did before. Probably the painting wasn't completely dry, and that's why it got super cloudy. So then I ended up trying to add some water to it to thin it out, but then it didn't do anything. So I'm like, you know what, I'm going to try to save this thing, and I'm just going to try to blend it in by shaping it around with my blender brush. But that clear leveling gel is so thick that it is going to leave those brush strokes exactly the way it looks right now as soon as it dries. Which means that how you would correct this if you find yourself in the situation is layers of spray varnish, letting each layer dry. Yeah. I guess the good thing is that it didn't pull up the paint as much as I thought it did. Just a little bit of a bummer because I was super happy with the way it was, I think, in video 2, and then I messed it up in video 3. Then I finally got it back to a place where I liked it again, and then I finished it by doing this. So here's the thing, sometimes you do this. Sometimes I'm still not unhappy with the piece. Like, I still think the piece turned out nice. It's just not like what it could have been, I know, but that's also not a bad thing. This is how you learn from your mistakes. So I can tell you in the next videos I switch my technique a little bit, and yeah, it worked out really well in the last ones. So yeah, these things happen. It's how we grow, it's how we learn, and I'm glad that I got to share it with you, because hopefully you can take some lessons from my own mistakes and apply it to your own work. Okay, I will see you in the next portrait. Bye.